super craving for some fish tacos, so that's what I'm gonna make today. I'm going to make them with a beer batter, so they'll have a nice crisp crunch to it. And I'll be using cod as my fish. You can use any kind of fish that you like, but make sure it has like a nice tender meat to it. To accompany that, I'll be making some black beans as well as some mango pico. So let's get to it. I'm starting with my garnishes because the cilantro is going to go into my pico as well. So I want to make sure I save enough cilantro for myself to put on my beans. So I'm going to start chopping up some cilantro right now. And then I'm going to, while I'm at it, I'll crumble up my queso fresco, which will also go on the beans. And then I'll just sit this aside in the fridge until I'm ready to plate. Next, I'll shred my cabbage. I'm going to leave the core in for now because it'll help keep my cabbage together while I'm using the mandolin. And I want it nice and fine so that it's easy to eat with my tacos. That should be enough for what we're eating today. Next, I'll work on my pico so it can marinate while I'm cooking the rest of the dish. So let's get to it. Alright, so I have all my ingredients for my pico in here, and I'm going to add a little bit of pucker with this red wine vinegar as well. I don't usually salt my pico because I feel like it takes away from the tanginess of my lime and my vinegar. And once again, I'm gonna put this in the fridge because I want it to stay nice, cool, and fresh. So I love to make cream sauces with just peppers and sour cream. I'm going to be using 4 jalapeños and then half of this tub, which you can either get the little 8-ounce size tubs or just use half of a medium-sized tub. So I'm going to chop up the jalapeños and de-seed them. I'm not going to chop them very small because I'm going to end up putting them in the food processor anyways. Okay, so this part's really easy. I'm just going to add in oil, which I already have in the pan, and then put the lid on it, and then put it on high. Keep an eye out if you're on a flat top surface like this one, because it's going to cook a lot faster than if you have a gas stove. So what's gonna happen is the peppers and the oil are gonna get really hot, and it's going to start splattering. So that's why I need the lid. And also the best way to do this is just to shake it around after about 4 or 5 minutes of once you're hearing that sizzle. And even if you have to kind of turn it so you can get the peppers flipped over. After 5 minutes, turn it down to low heat and let it cook for another 5 minutes to soften up the jalapeños. So for this, I'm going to use 2 cans of unsalted beans. I don't want the salt because I want to be the one to add in the salt to the dish myself. And then a small can of green chilies. These are mild, but you can use the hot ones if you like a spicier bean. Make sure you rinse all the bean juice off of the beans. And to start, I'm going to go over the stove and saute my green chilies, add in a little bit of spices, and then add my beans in with some water. So you can see this is definitely sizzling. Definitely contents under pressure here, but this is what we want. Just so I can show you, I'm going to open this up so you can see what's happening. Right now, I can smell a little bit of char, but I think it's coming from a little bit of leftover seeds. So nothing much has happened yet. I'm going to cover this back up and let it do its thing. You can see I just added my green chilies anyways, but this isn't gonna hurt the dish by adding the chilies but without the oil being hot. I've added my green chilies a little bit before it started actually getting hot, but that made it so that any of this liquid isn't gonna splatter back on my hand when I empty the can into the oil. I don't need to saute this too much. I just wanted to give something for my spices to stick to when I toast them. So I'm gonna add garlic powder. Onion powder. And oregano. All right, give that a stir. Make sure all my spice has been covered in oil so it gets toasted just a little bit. And that's good to go. I'm gonna add in my beans. Give them a quick saute. And I'm gonna add in some water. Whoops. And that's enough water for my beans right now. All right. So you can usually really smell these when they get toasty. I'm going to open the lid one more time for you all to see what's going on. And you can see there's a big difference here. I'm going to turn this all the way down. For this stove, I'm not going to put this back on the heat just yet. In fact, in this case, what I'm going to do, since it takes so long for this to cool off, I'm just going to set these in the back with the lid on the pan and let them continue to steam themselves. This I'll just let come to a simmer and cook it until the liquid has reduced and it's become very tender. Going to also add some salted at this step. Okay, so this recipe you definitely need a food processor for if you're going to make this kind of sauce. This is what my peppers ended up looking like. They're nice and charred and you can see they're wrinkly, which means they're nice and tender as well. So I'm going to pop these into the food processor. And then I'm going to show you how I blend it. Okay, so my peppers are in my food processor. This is a really easy sauce to make. I'm going to make sure I puree my peppers completely before I added my sour cream. So I'm going to do that now. I did that because it's harder to get the peppers completely pureed when it's mixing with the sour cream. And so when I say completely pureed, it's not mush, but it's pretty chopped up here. So half of my sour cream tub will go in here. And then I use a lot of salt. You can taste as you go, but you'll find that the more salt you have, the more flavorful the sauce will be. So this is about half a tablespoon. Now sometimes when it's sitting just in the bottle, it thickens up so much that it's hard to drizzle onto the tacos or wherever else you're using it for. So I like to thin it out with just a very tiny splash of milk. Gonna give it a taste. It's perfect. It's not too salty and it has a pretty strong kick from the jalapeno. If you don't like things quite as spicy, you can use poblano, which is a more mild pepper. And I'm just going to put this in the bottle just so it's easier to drizzle over our tacos. If you don't have a bottle, it's fine. Just carefully spoon it on top of the tacos that way. Next, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I make my batter. Sometimes some batters call for egg. I think it becomes more of a soft crust, but today I'm gonna have more of a light, flaky, crispy crust. So I'm going to exclude eggs from this batter. Also, the fun part about this is I chose a beer that I wanted to use for this batter. This is a blood orange IPA, and I thought some hints of orange with the fish and the jalapeno sauce is going to go great together. But you can use whatever you like. You can use a Mexican ale or whatever your choosing is, but you can play around with the flavors. This also works if you're going to make another dish like fish and chips. Maybe you'd want to use more of a brown ale instead of an IPA to go along with some fries. Anyways, I'm going to start adding ingredients to my dish, and I'll show you my proportions so you can follow along at home. All right, I'm going to start by adding 2 handfuls of flour, a sprinkle of baking powder. I might add a little bit more because the more baking powder you put in, the flakier and puffier it's going to make your batter. Now for seasonings, I want to give my dish a southwestern flavor, so I'm going to add in my onion powder, garlic powder, paprika, and cumin. And I always grab my cumin from the Mexican food aisle because it's cheaper. If you're gonna get them in a bottle, they're usually 3 times the cost of what you can get this bag for in that aisle. So pretty much what I did here was equal parts garlic, onion, and paprika, and then a little bit of cumin on top. And I'm going to take a whisk and whisk all this together. And I'm going to add my salt into my normal pinch of salt. Actually, I'll put 2 in. All right. Now I'm going to begin adding my beer in. And actually, what I'm going to do first is you kind of want to use this batter immediately. So I'm going to cut my fish first, then add my beer in and dip my fish in the batter and start frying so that my mixture isn't sitting around and losing all the effervescence that's in there. All right, so for today I got some cod. Cod is a really great fish to fry with, so that's why I chose it. And I'm going to cut them in strips because I want them to fit right inside my tortillas. So I'm just going to keep that in mind as I'm cutting the strips for my fish so that they fit nicely in my taco. So I'll start by separating this part right down the middle here. Okay. And then I'm going to imagine, you can take your tortilla and kind of measure it, but I'm going to say right about here is a good size. All right, now I'm going to begin cutting strips. This one's pretty thick, so I'm going to cut it in half first and then make my strips. Okay, and it doesn't hurt to add a little bit of salt at this point as well. Not too much. Fish tends to, like, I don't know, with fish, salt, a little bit of salt goes a long way, and you can oversalt fish really easily. Okay, so I'm going to first get my oil heated up on the stove, and then I'm going to come back, finish this batter, and dip and fry my fish. All right, so the oil will take a little bit of time to heat up. I've taken a shallow saucepan, and I filled it about halfway up with oil, and I'm going to put it on, in this stove I'll put it on level 7, but really you want a medium-high heat for this. So I have oil, like I said, I have my oil in the pot. Ideally, you want the temperature to be around 350 degrees. And what this does is it makes sure that your crust is cooking at the same time your fish is cooking, so that by the time your crust is golden brown and you can take it out of the oil, the fish is completely cooked through. If you end up overcooking some of the crust on your fish, you can always just pop it in the oven at about 400 or 425 just to get the fish cooked all the way through. If you do have a cooling rack laying around, put that on top of a sheet tray and then put your strips of fish on top of that, because if your fish is flush with the sheet pan, that bottom will become really soggy. Okay, so I'm going to begin by adding my beer into my flour. I'm just going to mix until the flour incorporates the beer. And this looks like a pretty good mix. I'm going to do a test fry just to make sure it comes out the consistency that I would like it. All right, so I'll get my station set up. With my plate and a towel to catch all the oil drippings. If you have a cooling rack, you can use that too. Also, you can see that my beans are boiling pretty well. They're about 75% done. Just do a test. Oh yeah, it's perfect. We are so close to the finish line. I'm going to start toasting my tortillas in the back here. And I have some foil here, so as I toast my tortillas, I'm going to put them in the foil to keep them warm. If you have a big griddle on your stove, this is one that would really come in handy. I'm going to let these fry for about 4 to 5 minutes each piece. So they're perfect. I'm not going to add any more salt because I'm going to get some salt from my cheese as well. So I'm just going to leave them just as they are. All right, so I'm just gonna continue what I'm doing here until I fried up all my fish. And then I like to double up the tortillas on my tacos. So I'm going to make 2 tortillas for each one of these pieces of fish. Like Julia Child style up in here, I make a mess.